I guess my joke with you around like masterminds and being busy, have you ever heard that like that saying that you should master or you should meditate for 10 minutes every day unless you're too busy for that, and then you should meditate for 20?
Yeah.
And we can get to this, but I just wanted to just riff with you is I almost feel like that's the benefit of a mastermind. It's like, build, like you said, curating people that you want to be around. And it's like setting up a coffee, like with that person, every week or every month or something. And usually that will end up burning out or, and then trying to do that with 8 people is like almost impossible. Um, Instead, just bringing all of those people that you'd want to have coffee with every week together for a conversation, it ends up creating a lot of value and like for everybody involved, like the individual and these relationships form that end up becoming a great gift in life.
Welcome to the Tailoring Talk Show with your host, Roberto Rivilla. I'm a bespoke tailor, menswear designer, and owner of Roberto Rivilla London Custom Clothing and Footwear. I activate your superpowers through the clothing I create and the conversations on this podcast. We'll meet self-starters and creators to learn about their journeys while they share valuable lessons to help you be the very best you can be. Please support the show by subscribing, and it helps so much if you take a few seconds to leave a rating and review. Today's guest started his first company at the age of 17 and was recruited by the president of the USA to speak at leadership conferences across the country. 3 years later, having almost died in a car accident, he decided to create the people in his life and start fresh, eventually landing his dream job at a Fortune 100 tech company. Today, he leads Punto Global, which has served thousands of entrepreneurs to connect with like-minded peers and build the relationships, health, and business they deeply desire. Here to show us what successful entrepreneurs do differently and the importance of walking people out of your life. Tailoring Talkers, please welcome Parker Harris to the show. Parker, how are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you, Roberto.
You're still here after our weird 15-minute pre-talk. I thought I'd scared you off. So thank you for sticking
Not a
around and
chance.
being so brave. But I wouldn't expect anything less from someone who has I don't know if achieved is the right word, but certainly packed a lot in your early years. Now, the audience might be thinking that you are still 20 years old at this stage, or 23 years old from that intro, if they've been adding everything up, because that's how my brain would go. But you're a little bit further on from that, aren't you? You're what, like 27, 28 now?
I'm 37.
Whatever. You're
It's
going to age well.
it's funny. I got my wife a facial like from an esthetician last week, and I ended up going in too because she loved the experience so much. And the person gave me the ultimate compliment from an esthetician. It was that she thought I had gotten Botox. So I'm
No.
feeling pretty good about myself this week.
Awesome. I do facials. I go every like 5 or 6 weeks, and it's partly to try and preserve my youth, but also, I mean, my mum, she was I don't know if you had Avon in the States.
Yeah,
Yeah, my mum was
I
an
think
Avon
so.
lady. Yeah, my mum was an Avon lady. So she used to kind of get all the free samples and stuff, and then she would just try them out on me. And then she put me into a skincare routine from like the age of 6 or 7 years old or something. So I'm eternally grateful because I
Yeah.
was at an event recently and somebody said that they thought I was 33 years old, which is really far from the truth.
Well, Bobby, you do have great skin,
Thank you. At
and it's
88 years old, I'm really, really grateful to my beautician, Amy. No, I'm not 88. I'm half that. But yeah, thank you. So, Parker, originally from San Diego, currently traveling Europe, and you're calling in from somewhere around the Black Sea. So thank you so much for interrupting your trip for me.
it's an honor, and I love Europe.
Yeah, so do we in Britain, despite what politically people might think. But we won't go there. I'm really angry about Brexit. So Where are we? What are we doing today? Um, okay. So Parker, life-changing event. Wait, actually, just bring the audience up to date, actually, and give us a bit of context. So early years, um, what was the first company that you actually started as a teenager?
Yeah, so I was one of those weird kids that didn't like watching, cartoons or comedies or even The Simpsons, which I get in trouble for sometimes. But and I got really interested in economics and business and politics at a young age. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to talk Brexit with you. um, but I also got really interested in health, back to skin, right?
Hmm.
Our largest organ. And I started a company called Your Health Store, which was like a vitamin and nutrition company that sold at different events, online, and through a catalog. When I was 17 with my best friend, who was a little bit
Yeah.
older than I was. Um, and we started to grow it, started to get some sales in, kind of learned to put myself out there. And was about to open up a storefront in San Diego, and I had a family friend who was a corporate attorney putting the paperwork together for us. And he asked me, he's like, "Hey, what do you want to do with this?" And I'm like, "Well, I want to build a company that has a big impact on the world." And he's like, "Well, it looks to me like you're creating a job for yourself. So if you really want to do that, you should go learn business," which he just, he just described as like the language of business, which was finance, and then go work for a big company. So whether that was the right decision or not, it's the path that I chose. And and then I went to work for a large company and kind of learned what the inner workings of that would look like.
Wow. So who was the president at that time? Was it Obama? Hang on,
No,
no. Wait.
it was a little bit
Sorry.
earlier than that.
Yeah. Duh. Um,
So it was
Bush,
George Bush
Clinton,
Jr.
George Bush Jr.
and
Okay.
he started an organization called Freedom's Answer,
Right.
which was the goal was to get younger people involved in civics and like engaged politically. And, I think we were successful in that the largest turnout for like 18 to 21-year olds was 2008.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, how awesome to have been able to put yourself up there and get to that sort of platform at such a tender age. Because most of us, entrepreneurs, let's call us that, don't actually get that till a lot later in life. If you think about it, the majority of entrepreneurs, they basically, go to college or, what we call college over here, you still call high school, I think, because you call university college. Um, and then we might go to university. I went to university, kind of dropped out pretty quick, because I just thought, what am I doing here when I could actually just be earning money? So I quit and went to do something else. Um, then we get into a job and we largely hate that job for a very long time. Although we might actually love what we do, it's kind of that we have that kind of gene in us where we don't actually like working for other people. And then eventually we kind of get brave or decide that we'll go and do it for ourselves. And we think that we're creating a company, but we actually are just creating, as you described earlier, a job for ourselves. And then some of us will fall along the wayside and some of us will prevail and we will start to educate ourselves. And then we will actually start to kind of grow a business or turn our jobs into some sort of business. You packed all of that into such a short space of time quite early on, which is pretty awesome. Um, but then you have a big life changer, this car crash. And I don't necessarily want you to go into the gory details of that. I've been through similar. I had a plant truck run over me when I was on my scooter about 6 years ago. And that changed a hell of a lot. My headspace, it was all spun around. My view of life was different. I think a certain amount of rewiring has gone on in my brain as well. There are certain things that I just, I can't cope with that I could before. There are other things that I couldn't cope with before that I can cope with now. There are things that I used to get emotional about that I'm just dead to now because of what's happened there. Um, Kind of take us back to that time. And again, but I was nearly 40 years old when that happened to me. So I'd kind of lived a bit of life. You're 20. You've only been here for like less than 2 decades.
Yeah,
What
there's a lot
was
to.
that? Yeah, what was that like for you? And how did you get through it out the other end?
So to get, let me get there. You might have to ask
Yeah.
this question again, but I I realized at a pretty young age that nothing was going to be given to me, and that the path that like I was on wasn't going to take me to where I wanted to go. And so I started working a lot and just finding ways to add value to other people. And I think that that's some like basically what entrepreneurship is adding value to other people. And for me, I really learned how to enjoy doing that, which I think gave me an advantage. Um, and then the political side, like getting involved in this nonprofit whose mission was to teach democracy to the next generation, um, helped me find my voice. But it also gave me exposure to, like, I thought I wanted to become a congressman or a senator or something like that. But I just saw so many broken promises and strategies and tactics that really turned me off. And I saw business as a place where your word was your bond. Right. And people chose to do business or not based on you doing what you said you were going to do, or
Mm.
me doing what I said I was going to do. And that really turned me on. And that was something that like I was excited about. And so that's kind of why I focused on it. But it was also a very lonely journey. And a lot of this was like pre-social media, with the opportunity to like, I was able to travel to these conferences, but I wasn't able to stay connected to these people in a way that maybe I would have been today. And so I would kind of go back to my school, and it was it was a less nurturing environment that I hope to provide for my children. And and so I ended up selling out, like in terms of like my own goals, my own dreams. I went from like an all boy Catholic high school to a really large university that was one of the biggest party schools in the United States. And I lost myself for a while. And I ended up surrounding myself with people that didn't really care about me, were probably taking advantage of me, and um, and I was just not making good decisions. And it led me to a bunch of places where, looking back, I, I learned a lot from, but maybe I could have had a better use of my time and energy. And I was leaving a party, and I was not in a position to drive. And I ran through a barrier like in the middle of the road, and the car flipped multiple times and went over a guardrail and dropped, 30 or 40 feet, and landed on all four tires. And like, I'm so grateful. Like, one of my biggest gratitudes from that is that I didn't hit anybody. Like,
Mm.
no one else was involved in that accident, and no one else was in the car with me. And I wasn't like dismembered or like injured in a way
Mm.
where I lost use of any parts of my body. But I remember waking up in the hospital with handcuffs on my wrist, like chained to the bed, and not feeling like I could call anybody, you know?
Yeah.
And I just had to kind of like sit with that and deal with myself. And I ended up, I told my parents the next day, and I just took a good hard look at my life and realized that I had to make some different decisions. And I looked at everyone that was in my life, and I was like, this is, I'm going to start another chapter. And I don't think any of these people are going to go with me. And rather than just escaping, I had some of those difficult conversations with those people. And the visual I had in my head, or the language that I had in my head, was walking these people out of my life. And so, I told them, like, usually one at a time, not like sitting them all down. And it didn't come from a place of judgment. It was just like what served me and who I wanted to become. And, for some of those conversations, I cried. Some of them I didn't. Right. And then I spent the next, 12 to 18 months really recommitting myself to excellence, committing myself back to school, actually reading and studying and being very alone, and like walking to school and seeing people in houses like laughing and having a good time, and seeing the value of that in a really visceral way, but also not wanting to like rush or like get that in a place that I had gotten it previously. So up into that point, or after that point, I was very careful on who I let into my inner circle and who I surrounded
Mm.
myself with. And that actually became the foundation for Junto, or like this group was that those people. Um, so I'll stop there. I think there's a little bit more to say on it, but I'm feeling some of that energy right now.
Yeah, no, and I can I'm feeling everything that you were going through as you were sharing that as well. Part of me is really sorry I asked you the question and made you relive some of it as well.
Oh
But
no,
you know,
please.
the interesting thing that comes out of that for me is, well, there's so many interesting things that come out of that for me, but one of them is that when we talk about, and if we've talked about it on this show with various guests previously, about curating the people, you know, that you have in your life. Um, it's the first time I've heard the phrase walking people out of your life. So walking with them out of your life. Because most of the time when we talk about curating people, it's like, okay, it is the word that's used most often is cutting people out of your life because they're like a cancer, something bad that you need to take a scalpel to and you need to just get it out of there. And that's how I've described it, you know, the last few years. And I will very much, I would say actually 100% of the time, I have done exactly that. I've probably not given any explanation whatsoever. I've just been like, I can't deal with that energy in my life anymore. And I'm not going to. And I just drop it. And for some people, I feel like they wouldn't care anyway, even if I did try to sit down with them and have a conversation with them about where I was going and why, you know, unfortunately, our journey together was going to be no more. Um, and but then there are other people where now I think about it, um, I was probably quite harsh, um, which is kind of a weird one because as a person, I don't think I'm naturally like that. But then I guess where I don't know, going through this period of change that I've been on the last 5 or 6 years. In our pre-talk, I said to you it was chaos, but it was good chaos because it was stretching and breaking and growth and all of those wonderful things. But still, you know, even now I realize there's some people that I could have handled things a little bit better with, and I probably would have rather have walked them out rather than just kind of cut them off. Um, because also life is funny. You know, you think you're leaving one chapter behind, never to be seen again, but then that story can pick up years or decades later without you knowing it, without you engineering it, without you consciously doing anything to kind of, you know, make that story kind of thread its way back into your life. But then all of a sudden, you don't know, that person, that situation can come back, you know, for different reasons. Maybe, you know, they weren't someone that you could have that could help you along the way or be part of the journey you're on or the person that you were becoming at that point in time. But maybe 20, 30 years down the line, they come back into your life and actually you need them at that time or they need you.
It's interesting. Like, I think what we're talking about here is almost leadership. Like, it relates to leadership in a way. And when I made that choice to move forward, I was leading myself at that time, and having that conversation. You know, I've heard it said, and I love this quote. It's you can judge the amount of success that someone's going to have in their life by the amount of uncomfortable conversations they're able to have. And it's definitely an uncomfortable conversation. And I'm not saying that we need to do it with everyone. Like, if someone is lying, cheating, stealing, or like harming me, or us, or you. Like, I think sometimes a clean break is fine. Some of these people were people I loved, or friends, or people, brothers, sisters, in my wording of them. I'm an
Yeah.
only child, but um and it was interesting that over 5 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, some of those people came back in my life and were like, Parker, I'm so glad you did that. Like, it made me question the path I was on. And so sometimes I think leadership can be a very lonely journey. And when we make that impact on other people, it can be some of the most rewarding things, that maybe at the end of our life we look back on, and it's like that was the real reward versus, the money or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, I've been such a dick. Um, I will try to be better. I'm actually getting better at walking clients out of my life. So I will actually sit down with those people rather than just dropping them and kind of explain why I don't want to work with them anymore. Um, so yeah.
That's
I'm
courageous. and
yeah,
and I'll just say, Bobby, like, I don't think you need to judge yourself unless it serves you to judge yourself that way. I think a lot of this stuff, like you said, there's not really a clean break in life, as much as we
yeah,
want that to happen. And if there's anyone that pops in your head that you're like, wow, like I could have, I wish I would have handled this differently, or, oh, like, this relationship mattered. I still maybe made the right decision, but how I did it could have been different. I think that conversation is still possible, and maybe would serve that person and you.
yeah. I mean, the one thing that I have definitely got better at, because it's like exercise, right? You have to work at it until it becomes muscle memory, and then you just do it without thinking. So now it's like, so I still, do stupid stuff or handle things really badly in the moment. But then I immediately, now my muscle memory kicks in because I've been working so hard at it. I ask myself the question, did you really handle that in the best way that you could have? And what could you have done differently, given the opportunity again? And I say to myself, well, quite honestly, I was a bit of a dick. I could have done it this way. And then what I do, if I still have the opportunity, I pick up the phone and I get that person on the other end of the line. And it's so scary to do it because you really feel like, so many thoughts go through your head. You're like, they're not going to want to talk to me. I've been an asshole. And I say to him, hey, listen, I was just thinking about what happened when we were together yesterday, or whatever it was that happened. And I really felt like I could have done better. And I firstly wanted to apologize. And once I get those words out of my mouth, the rest of the conversation is really, really easy. And so, at the moment, I'm kind of in this space of kind of dropping people off a cliff, but reaching down and pulling them back. What I now need to get to, which I guess is the next stage of growth, is not dropping them off the cliff in the first place, but maybe just sitting on the edge of it with them side by side as two people that have a relationship of some sort, and kind of just working through it. So thank you for impacting my thinking in that regard. And I hope that people listening, and again, I'm really sorry this has got so deep, but
Oh, that's only conversations I like to have.
yeah, I know. I imagine you and I just getting together like for dinner, and that's it. We'd be going into the small hours of the morning. Um,
I'd like that. May I
yeah,
may I share something based on what you just
yeah,
said?
absolutely. Go for it.
Is one of the ideas that's been coming up in different masterminds that I'm a part of is this idea of creating boundaries. And I think it's something that doesn't get talked a lot about in school, or really even in personal development. And I think, whether it's with our friends, our coworkers, our team, the PR, our families, for me,
Our
my
clients.
yeah, even our significant other. I've grown a lot over the last 6 to 12 months, around not taking on my wife's energy. Like if she's like if something's really bothering her, that doesn't mean I need to be really bothered, you know? And I used
Yeah.
to think that's what love meant, right? Was like your storm, your storm clouds are my storm clouds, and I'm going to experience that. But I've learned that that doesn't best serve anybody. And I you said like, oh, I've been a dick, and I think, you know, whether it's a psychopath or a dick or an asshole, like those people don't think that they're doing anything wrong. Like a real dick or asshole like wouldn't have any regret around it, in
Yeah,
my
they wouldn't
opinion.
have any remorse whatsoever. They wouldn't be feeling guilty about it afterwards and wanting to try and make things right to whatever level that means for that
Potentially,
situation,
I think
potentially.
so. I think so. I think so. Um, I think part of being confrontational and disagreeable can serve leaders and entrepreneurs at a different point. Um, I've heard some really interesting talks on that from sociologists and psychologists, and even earning potential being tied to disagreeableness and the ability to like stand up for ourselves and like be confrontational, that there's some value created from that. um but I think that there's a different journey happening here, and it's like the four stages of learning. Are you like I'm sure you're familiar with this, but it's essentially like unconscious incompetence, and then conscious incompetence, and then conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. And I think this idea of walking people out of our life or creating boundaries, and essentially what I'm hearing from you is that you were unconsciously incompetent around it, but potentially, and now you're becoming consciously incompetent.
Hmm.
And then the next step is just consciously competent. And it's just that learning journey shows up in so many areas of life. And I think, unfortunately, most people are just not even willing to go through that journey. There's like a lack of awareness. And most, even myself, like looking back, I thought I was a master in all these things when I wasn't even unconsciously, or like I wasn't even consciously incompetent at those things. I was just like totally unconsciously incompetent and happy in that bliss of it. Um, so yeah, I don't think, sometimes that judgment creates this like identity, like around like, oh, I am just this, right? This like label, this judgment. And then a story gets created from that sometimes doesn't serve a person. It hasn't served me. And I think learning to like write that story based on the identity that we want to have, and essentially process triggers that come up, like these things that happen that we don't want to happen, like Mike Tyson said, like the punches in the face that life gives us. um if we learn how to process those triggers to create a story that serves us versus a story that doesn't serve us, I think that's
Mm.
the difference between success and failure.
Wow. Part of that growth also comes from the people that you hang around with. So as much as we're talking about, we have talked about walking people out of our lives, it's also about the people that you bring in and you choose to kind of hang around with. I mean, a couple of years ago, just as we came out of the pandemic, I previously had not. Yeah, I know you lot listening at home, you've heard this before, but Parker and I have only just met. Okay, he hasn't heard it, so just skip forward if you need to. But the long story short is that I made a decision. I didn't do networking stuff. I didn't go to events and things because, I don't like sort of jumping into a room and having to talk to people. I'm fine if they initiate conversation. If it's the other way around, like forget it. Um, and I just made a decision that from the beginning of 2022, I would just say yes to everything. Yeah, that Jim Carrey, Zoe Deschanel movie, Yes Man. I would just do that, and it has started to change my life. It has changed my life actually, for the better, and definitely the people that it's brought in to my life, that are a big part of that. Yeah, anyone from Founders Club that's listening, shout out to all of you wonderful people. Um, at the same time, it has also brought people in that potentially, could be toxic or dangerous. but then I'm able to sort of recognize that and sort of learn how I'm going to sort of navigate around and make sure that they kind of stay at the door, as it were. Um, Junto is something that you started and is now a thriving place for entrepreneurs to go. It's, I guess you describe it as a mastermind for entrepreneurs. What's your definition of a mastermind, first of all? Because you know, for some people it's you know, you pay a lot of money to jump on a Zoom call on a certain date in a certain location, and there's a whole bunch of other people on it, and it's almost like a big networking thing. For others, it's a place where people can come to regularly to kind of share things that you wouldn't necessarily get the answers to from the normal places. Like for most of us, if we've got a question to ask in any area of life, we just Google it. What's your definition of a mastermind, or what is Junto to the concept of a mastermind?
So the definition of a mastermind that most resonates with me is two or more minds coming together in the spirit of harmony to accomplish a common goal. There's so much more I want to say.
Yeah, no, carry on.
That's the definition.
Do you know what show you're on? This is, you know, like my questions are super long and your answers can be a million times longer. So you carry on. You got something you want to say? Continue, please.
I think the value, like for me, I invested a lot in building a network, a professional network when I was in college or university, and then post university as well. I was attending a lot of events, and I noticed this thing. Most of the time, what would happen is someone would be like, "So, what do you do?" Right, the first question, like, "What do you do?" And I would answer, and if they couldn't sell me something or benefit from me, like they would make that assessment in 15 seconds. They would start just kind of like looking over me at like, oh, who else is here? Who else can I talk to? And it was kind of like
the
this
whole kind of at some point in the call, it's like, oh, I've just seen someone over there. I need to say hi to you. And then they just kind of drop you. Because I've heard that in a few of the kind of groups that I've got involved with, where I actually, when I hear other people talking about me, I hear good things. Like he's someone who makes you feel comfortable, is really interested in you, no matter what you do. Even if you're someone that would never use his services, he still wants to find out about you and to see if there's a way that he can help you. And that's exactly, what my intention is. I don't care if I meet you and you never want to buy tailored clothing. It's, okay, fine, whatever. But if I can find out about you and connect with you on a certain level, and if there's some resource, or if there's something I have, or if I'm connected to somebody in my network that through finding out about you, I can find a way to help you and not hold on to that power, then I will try and do that. And then similarly, I've heard, okay, well, that's Bobby, unlike so-and-so person who, when you meet them, because you're not someone that they can make money out of, they'll be polite for about 5 seconds and then they'll drop you and move on to someone else. That's not what it's about for me.
What's the difference between being transactional and being relational?
Yeah.
Right. And everything becomes possible when there's that desire to add value to other people, and having a certain level of abundance around energy and connections and resources versus, again, being transactional. It's like, well, what can I get out of this? And, for me, a mastermind space is when we have each other's best interests at heart. Like there's not like this like hidden agenda that we're like really there for. We're really transparent about like what we're there for. And like, I heard this from someone else. But a mastermind is relevant when your problems are no longer Googleable, right? You said like most people can just like Google their way there. And I think that's important because if we can't help ourselves, then what business do we have help, asking for help? But there's a certain point in the journey when we can't Google it anymore. At least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Even using ChatGPT recently, I've had a few things come up where I'm just like very unsatisfied with the answers. um, and and being around other people that are going through it or have gone through it, or have learned how to think critically, which I think is one of the kind of the rarest traits now in the world, is that ability to think critically. Often what happens in a mastermind environment is not someone telling you what you should do. It's not like a place to get advice. It's a place to get the question, right? Like sometimes it's like what we think the problem isn't actually the problem. And it's like a little bit deeper and we need to get to a root cause around it. And then once we get the right question, and it's like the quality of our life determines the quality of our questions, the quality of our questions determines the quality of our life. Then we get to hear the truth within ourselves that we already know, but we didn't have the question. And one of the questions we ask someone when we're onboarding them into our community is, what's a question that you would invest $100,000 to be able to answer? And some people have that question, but most people don't. And the thing about it is, if we don't have that question, then we'll never be able to get it answered, even if it doesn't cost $100,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's some interesting ways, but often we don't. I think sometimes like we're always fascinated by the 50 steps ahead. What did Elon Musk do, right? Or what did And it's like, hey, like, you're right here. We need to get you right here. What's holding you back right now? What's that bottleneck?
Yeah.
And most people think it's like, oh, I need more customers. Like it's some sort of like marketing thing or sales thing. And usually we see it's something way deeper. Whether it's, again, back to that identity layer, whether it's a limiting belief, whether it's like a lack of alignment between vision and habits. There's just a lot of layers deep that people get to go. And often, we don't know what's holding us back.
Yeah, often we don't know what's holding us back until we put ourselves out there to a group of people with that kind of growth mindset, growth and service mindset, service of others mindset. Because they're outside of our perceived problem and I guess can turn the Rubik's Cube from a different perspective. And certainly I've been finding a lot of the problems that I've been having and the bottlenecks that I've been having as I've opened myself up to other people who have that shared mindset, has helped, not necessarily to solve all of them, but certainly to start unlocking some of the numbers in the combination lock to start kind of getting some of the way there. Am I using too many metaphors or analogies or whatever?
I love these words. I'm not sure about for other people, but I can see what you're saying. And
yeah.
And I think what's interesting about that, like, I want to hold. I'm like trying to hold on to a few different ideas that are coming up at once. But I'll just share an example. For me, is I came to a mastermind meeting once, and I was like, this is where my business is at, and like we're just having a hard time with this, and I really want to get like here, and like nothing that I'm trying is working, and one of the other members is like, Parker, I don't think this is like a customer acquisition issue or like a sales issue. Like it seems to me that you have like a victim mindset around like this. And I was like kind of angry about when that person said it. I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
I've been doing personal development for 10 years. I don't have a victim mindset. And I sat with it for like 3 or 4 days. And I eventually realized that he was right. And it unlocked a whole, like the next level of growth for me. And I didn't know it was on that mindset level, like that victim versus hero mindset. And I think that's one of the things about entrepreneurship that most people don't like, that someone that's not an entrepreneur doesn't get. They think it's like, it's just so great, right? This freedom and money and just all these like things, but it's actually the most humbling experience in my opinion. Like entrepreneurship is like very humbling, because there's this realization that I had as an entrepreneur, and I've heard other entrepreneurs have it. They realize that it's on them, and that no one else is coming to save them, and that no one really cares about them, right? They care about themselves and the value that the entrepreneur can provide to them. And so there's no favors being done, right? Like this is a game of like adding value to other people and being rewarded for that. And I think that's a great gift of life, is like that realization that it's not about me, right? It's about the other person. And when that reframe is possible, everything becomes possible. And I think a lot of people, and I'm thinking about some people in my family and in my life, and probably the larger world, when I see what's happening in the world, and every once in a while when I poke my head up, is that there's a strong desire to be the victim and to have it be about me versus being around everyone else. And entrepreneurs, for better or worse, realize that it's not about them, it's about the other people. And there's a certain level of humility and I think accurate thinking that comes along with that.
Yeah. And it's this, because for anyone who's listening, who's thinking, hey, you said at the start, you're going to tell us what successful entrepreneurs do differently to people who aren't as successful. Well, we're talking about it right now. Successful entrepreneurs come from a place of giving and a certain level of selflessness. Because certainly I can think back to times, I've been doing what I do for 21 years, 12 of it under my own brand as a fully fledged entrepreneur. And the other 10 years before that, or whatever it is, as an employee, but an employee with an entrepreneur, business owner mentality and mindset. And I'd like to think that's why I've had a certain level of success in whatever I've done, because of the mindset I've had. I think the biggest problem, the biggest regret that I have over that time is that I did it largely on my own. And I didn't seek help when I needed it. And I didn't open up myself to help when it was offered to me.
Bobby, I think that's one side of the paradox. I was on the other side of that paradox, where I was asking for help. I was like looking for advisors and mentors and people that had the answer. And I relied on their answer to be my answer versus learning to hear the truth for myself and like I've had the fortune of being able to meet with several billionaires and just really successful entrepreneurs. And at a certain point in the conversation, I'll ask them like, how do you make decisions? And 98% of the time the answer is my gut. And I'm like, what does that mean? And I was so interested in finding the answer outside of me and through that network that I'd carefully cultivated and worked hard to create, versus I think one of the big gifts of life is being able to hear my own gut. And so I think there's a balance. There's like not a balance, a paradox.
Yeah.
That maybe we're hitting on here, that I'm interested in writing a book called Standing in Paradox, because I think that's what leaders have to do. It's like somehow there's two truths that contradict each other.
Yeah.
And rather than judging one side of that truth and being like, this one's right, right? Like we should always find the answer. We need to develop advisors and mentors and asking for help versus like your approach was like doing it myself. And like, I think that those are two contradictory truths that are somehow both true. And we need to stand in that paradox and understand both of those sides and how they can both work and how they can both work for the individual, versus like, oh, there's only one right way to do something.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest lessons I learned, because people ask me all the time, how do you make decisions? We had a big decision to make recently that a lot of my clients and some of my friends cannot get their heads around how it. So I've been going on for a long time. So we have our workroom in London where, we make a lot of our clothes, and we also see clients there. And I visit clients too, although I've been kind of trimming that side of the service down as I get older because, I've got to have an eye on when I'm a lot older and I'm maybe less physically able. I don't want to be running around like I was when I was 25 years old, because physically you just can't do it, right? So you have to adapt and all the rest of it and start thinking about the future. But, clients come into the workroom and it's not the best experience. The end result we give is amazing. The journey to get there it doesn't marry up. You know what I mean? Because the workroom's a bit rough and ready. It's not like, super luxurious and all the rest of it. But then you contrast that with the complete opposite to what a lot of my peers do, is that they have fancy places, whiskey and Chesterfields and all of that nonsense. And then the end result is not what the experience led the customer to expect they were going to get. So you were talking about paradoxes. We need to kind of find a happy balance between the two. So the big goal that I've had, and I always share a lot of my goals with other people, and I have had advice from past guests, even on this podcast, who've said, never share your goals, because people will find ways to tell you that you can't achieve them and so on. I kind of see that point of view, but for me, it's like, if I've got a big goal and I share it, I'm willing it into existence, and I'm what's the word? I can't think of the right word for it, but I'm gonna attract, huh?
Manifesting.
Yeah, manifesting, exactly. So the things that I need, the energy I need, the resources that I need to make that goal become real will suddenly start appearing in my life. And so looking for a studio space has been the big thing that I'm talking about with everybody. And we found it. It manifested. But then 48 hours before we were due to take the keys to the place, I had to back out because there were things in the contract that we had been asking for weeks and weeks and weeks. When it finally came through, there were clauses that just didn't sit right with me and that weren't going to work, unfortunately. And so I had to write to the person who had given us this opportunity. And this is where I'm really proud of my growth, because rather than just walking away and saying, I'm not doing this, I walked away and said, I can't do this. But I gave an explanation and I said, thank you for the opportunity that you presented to us. I am really, really upset that this isn't going to work out. But I am also very, very grateful to you, because although we can't work together, you've now set me on the path to taking this huge step for my business. And we parted as friends. So that's my maturity story. But anyway,
Bobby, I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure.
Like you said that you have friends that have the space, the whiskey and the Chesterfield.
I wouldn't say they're my friends; they're like competitors. But anyway, carry on.
Well, collaborators, right? I'm wondering if there's an opportunity there, and maybe we go offline with this, but is there an opportunity to? I'm using the word partner very loosely here, but form a mutually beneficial relationship with potentially multiple people that have those spaces. And I would have some conversations, like exploratory conversations, where it's like, hey, how can we add value to each other here? Because I can help you on the back end, like creating that like that wow moment for your people with the work that we do. And maybe I give it to them at a preferred rate so that they're able to actually make more money from it and create happier customers and more lifetime. You're then getting more business without even having to sell because they're selling. And then you also potentially get access to those spaces to use for your fittings, and you're doing the work, and then maybe they get something for that, like a small percentage. I don't like we would have to spend some time to get the questions dialed in to have some of these conversations, because essentially what we're doing is like customer discovery here, even though they're not actually. But I would say like you probably dodged a bullet by not increasing your monthly expenditures by getting that space. And like I think the leaner you can keep it, and it's like if you can deliver the product, that's great. It seems like there's probably a lot of these different spaces, and then they have their own problem that you can solve. And maybe there's like a bigger opportunity for you to 5-10x this business over an 18-month period by forming some of these relationships with competitors that are no longer competitors. These people are part of your, in Japan they would call it a karetsu, like, which is like essentially like an alliance, a business alliance.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I had this knee-jerk reaction when you started talking, and then as you progressed, actually it's different. Now I see how this mastermind thing works. That's so cool. That's definitely worth. Yeah, you've interrupted my thinking, which is always a good thing, actually. No, thank you. So what were we talking about? Oh, we were talking about decision making. So so people were saying to me, you were so close. Like, how did you, like, I don't understand how you made the decision to back out when you were that close. Why don't you just go with it? And I say to them, because just going with it was the easy thing to do. I was taught by an ex-boss of mine, chairman of a big company that I worked at. And I remember, I used to always like to get these quiet moments with people in the leadership teams of the businesses I worked in, because obviously they were older and wiser than me and they'd lived more life and so on. So I'd learn as much as I could from them. And I remember he said to me, when you're faced, generally speaking in life, when you are faced with a decision, you will have two choices to make. And almost always, the more difficult of the two choices is the right one. And in the moment, it was easier for me to say, sign the damn thing, get on with it, pay the money, let's do the move, because everything was all set up, ready to go. The harder decision, because I had to take a breath and think about it, I was like, if I back out of this is going to be really difficult. I'm going to have to call the removals company. I'm going to have to cancel that. I'm going to have to say no to this person. Person renting the space to us was actually a client of mine, who I'm in the same cycle club as. So I see him like every week. All of that was just really, really difficult stuff. And that's how I knew it was the right choice to make. And it still doesn't feel like it. People listening, it still doesn't necessarily feel like it at the moment you then cross the line and you make that decision. But in the days that come afterwards, once the dust settles down, you realize that it was actually the right decision, which is the place that I'm in right now, like a week later or whatever. So that's my thing on decision making. I think, I get the gut argument, but people say, it's like, how do you make a decision? It's like, I rely on my gut. Well, what the hell does that mean? I've personally, just my personal opinion and my experience, I've come to learn that gut instinct is different things to different people. And for me personally, gut instinct, Parker, is something happens, you have to make a choice. You've got one or two things that you can do. Which one is the more gut-wrenching? Which one's the harder one? Which one's the one that you're resisting against more? That's usually the right one.
And if you start like abstracting this out to all areas of life, right? It's like, I think most people go with the easy decision, whether it's a relationship that they're in, whether it's the thing that they're consuming in their body, whether it's you know, there's just, I think this can be applied in so many different ways. And it really like makes all the difference, And I think the reason why the gut piece of it is so hard to communicate to someone else is because in my opinion, it's honed from experience of not listening to it or listening to it, right? And like essentially the experience of failing. And I love this idea that, failure is the highway to success. And I think unfortunately, college and university and just the school system really promotes this idea of like getting 100%, where entrepreneurship is more like, being willing to be wrong every day and maybe being wrong more than we're right, but continuing on that path. And then someday I think that those hard decisions may end up becoming easy because we've just grooved it. Like we've calloused it over. We have those grooves. So it sounds sexy or easy, but I think going through it goes back to like who we become. And it's like someone that we can trust ourselves. And that's just a huge gift.
Yeah. Wow. I feel like we've inadvertently been on a 2-person mastermind the last however long it's been, 45 minutes, an hour, I don't even know.
Probably two or more minds coming together in the spirit of harmony to accomplish a common goal, which was add value to your people. So I think that's exactly what happened.
Exactly. My head is swimming in a good way right now. So no, thank you so much. Anyone who's listening that wants to connect with you, where can they find you?
I am active on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and my handle or name is Zachary Parker Harris.
Awesome. I'll make sure I put those links in the show notes, and also the link to Junto.global, which is where people can go online to find out more about your mastermind community. Thank you so much. Where's next for you and your other half on your travels around Europe?
We are on our way to Montenegro next week.
Oh, wow. You'll have to tell me what it's like.
I'm excited. It'll be my first time there, but I've heard great things about it.
Yeah. I think Montenegro was the location for some of Casino Royale.
Is it like I've been thinking that it was like Casino Montenegro or Hotel Montenegro or something. So I'm not sure. It's supposed to be beautiful. It's right on the Bay of Kotor, which it sounds like is a very old place. And I never really thought I would fall in love with the Balkans, but it's very much grown on me, and I'm loving it.
Yeah, it's become a very popular vacation destination for a lot of people. You hear so much nowadays where it's like, oh, we went away over the summer. It's like, oh, where did you go? Mediterranean? And it's like, no, I went to Montenegro or Croatia or somewhere like that. I've got my I can't even hold it up because it's so damn heavy. James Bond archive book. So I was going to see if I could really quickly just double check, but I tell you what, I'll look it up and then I'll let you know.
Yeah, I'd love to have another conversation too around like your business, like where like this kind of decision that you have to make, and if I could support you with some questions that to move this forward. I think you probably have an opportunity here that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you lot listening, definitely do check out junto.global. So that will take you to the Junto Mastermind thing. How do you describe it?
I mean, I describe it as a mastermind for entrepreneurs, but yeah, I think it's a place for like to, at a certain point in an entrepreneur's journey, a mentor or like a coach maybe doesn't have all the answers for them. And so connecting with peers, like other entrepreneurs, getting to root cause and breaking through bottlenecks, like it's this thing that create such a return on investment and like a lot of leverage that, for most entrepreneurs, CEOs, executives, it's something that they'll participate in it, they'll get involved in at a certain point of their career, and then they'll participate in it the rest of their life because there's just so much value that's created. And part of that is business, but I think a lot of it comes down to relationships and learning about ourselves and almost, growing as a leader, growing as a human being. And, I think it's the future of education, personally.
Yeah, totally. Funny thing is, I'm asking you to define a mastermind, describe it to me. A lot of the people that listen to my podcast, they know exactly what a mastermind is. They are probably part of various groups like this, and they're probably screaming at their iPhones or whatever they're listening to this podcast on, saying, Bobby, you stupid idiot. And next time I see them, I'm going to get about 500 different lessons on masterminds and all the rest of it. So yeah, so sorry to put you through that.
No, I think it's a great question. I'm excited to be able to explain it to someone in one or two sentences. I've worked with some mentors who owned and operated some of the biggest mastermind organizations in the world, and they tell me they were never able to get it down to an elevator pitch either, because I think at the end of the day, it's something that people have to experience to understand. It's not like something that we can like tell. This is going to be a really weird analogy, but it's kind of like sex, right? Like you can't really explain that to somebody, but then once you experience it, it's like it's visceral. And I think that there's probably different things in life that are like that, where it's like we want to explain it to someone, but it's just like words will never do it justice. Even a picture or a video, it's like people have to experience it for themselves to really understand it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that was the wrong analogy to use with me. I don't know what you're talking about now. I'm kidding.
I've never used that one before. I like it.
I'm really glad that I brought that out of you. Parker, have you had fun?
Yeah, I had a great time, Bobby. I next time I'm in England, I'm gonna reach out to you.
Definitely make sure you do it. For sure. Parker, thank you so much. You've been so giving today. I'm on Punto.Global, so I'm going to definitely be checking it out, and I suggest everybody does the same. Thank you all so much for joining Parker and I on this episode. Don't forget, Tailoring Talk is on Instagram, and I love feedback, so email me at the usual address. Remember to subscribe, rate and review, and you can also, very important, click the share button in your player to send this episode on to someone you know who might get some help or be inspired by what Parker shared today. And if you're enjoying Tailoring Talk and want to support the show, you can do so with the Dooberries in the show notes. Have a great week, be good to each other, and I'll see you on the next one.